Welcome to the newest episode, a Friday edition of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. This week has been chock full of various announcements like the decision to change the COTA course in 2025, and of course more silly season news with a couple of drivers finding homes, including Riley Herbst. I have one championship-winning crew chief's opinion on the new 2311 racing driver and whether or not he's ready for Cup. Plus, Kyle Busch's crew chief Randall Burnett shared his thoughts this week on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio on how the demise of Stewart-Haas Racing should help the number 8 team and Richard Childress Racing as a whole in 2025. Plus, Burnett also didn't sugarcoat what he thought about those COTA changes. Sticking with crew chiefs, and Martin Truex Jr.'s former crew chief, James Small, was talking about his expectations in 2025 for the new number 19 driver Chase Brisco, and threw some shade at the previous number 19 driver in the process. Dale Earnhardt Jr. let fans know just what Truex is thinking about those remarks. I also have the surprise late-breaking news that will affect Denny Hamlin in 2025. And finally, we'll discuss the comments of NASCAR President Steve Phelps from an interview yesterday on the future of Fontana. However, before we get to that, let's go back to Wednesday, and I was listening to SiriusXM NASCAR Radio's On Track show. Larry McReynolds was out, and 2018 Cup Series winning crew chief Todd Gordon was sitting in as a guest co-host with Danielle Trotta. The pair were talking about the announcement of Riley Herbst driving the number 35 car for 2311 in 2025, when Trotta asked Gordon if he thought Herbst was ready for a full-time Cup ride.
Is Riley Herbst ready for a full-time Cup Series ride?
I think time will tell us that. If you ask me to just look at body of work, I would say, honestly, candidly, I'd say no. I'd like to see him be a little more consistent, but the trajectory's been there.
Now, I have to admit, when I heard Gordon's remarks, I immediately thought back to what Jeff Burton had to say about the Xfinity Series driver in October at the Charlotte Roval.
And the same goes for this young driver, Riley Herbst. I think the most improved driver in NASCAR's top 3 series over the last couple years.
That improvement obviously earned Herbst an opportunity at 2311 next season. That, and of course, the Monster sponsorship. I'll be interested to see how he does in 2025. Also on Wednesday, Kyle Busch's crew chief Randall Burnett made his final weekly appearance on SiriusXM, where he recapped the up and down 2024 campaign and discussed the day's breaking news related to RCR, and that was the hiring of Brisco's crew chief Richard Boswell as the crew chief for Austin Dillon in 2025. During that conversation, Gordon suggested Boswell could help RCR improve on short tracks based on SHR success in 2024.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they ran really well at places like Martinsville. They ran really good at some of the short track races. So that's already been brought up, and talked about of, hey, maybe we need to look at, what was working for you at the short tracks and look at what we were doing at the intermediate tracks, and hopefully we'll all come up with a good package for each going forward, and maybe really further our program. That's the nice part about having new ideas come in, new people come in, fresh faces, fresh ideas. You can really bounce some things off each other and learn from each other and really try to grow your program. So that's what we're going to be doing here in the next couple months, and hopefully come out of Bowman Gray pretty strong and carry that momentum into Daytona.
Burnett talked about carrying momentum into Daytona, and later in his chat with Gordon and Trotta, didn't sugarcoat what he thought about the other breaking news on the day, the announcement that COTA will be shortened next season.
It'll be an interesting change for sure. I'm going to miss the old course. COTA's a really exciting track. I like the long course, but every now and then you need to change some things up, and hopefully that helps out with the TV stuff, helps out with the fans, getting them some more laps to see. And all that, cuts down on the caution laps. You're going to have at least 2 at the stage breaks, and at road courses we end up, having quite a few more than that usually. So, I think it's just going to help kind of compact all that and maybe make the race a little more efficient. Like I said, I'm going to hate seeing the big course go, but always open to seeing new things.
You guys know this is my home track. I understand the decision from both sides. The shortened track will be better for television with shorter cautions, and it will obviously allow fans to see more racing with more laps. But the counterpoint to that is it will now remove one of the key passing zones on the track, passing on a track that's already limited. But like Burnett said, I'm open to seeing new things, so we'll see how this goes, and I'll be sure and let you know what I think about it come March. Moving on to our next story, and it also happened on Wednesday, when the remarks of Martin Truex Jr.'s former crew chief, James Small, from an interview a week earlier on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio made their way around social media. Take a listen to what he had to say about Chase Brisco.
He's a really good kid. I spent a lot of time with him, talking to him, and he seems very motivated, to do well. And he's got a point to prove and, to show people now that he's going to be in a much more competitive car week on, week out, that, he can do this and win multiple races a year. So, we're going to push him hard, and it's just going to be really great to actually have somebody, for one, that lives in North Carolina, and two, comes into the shop multiple times a week. So, we can actually build the team around him and have him in the process of, developing the setup each week and helping us be better as well. So, we're all really excited to have him on board, and I think it's going to be a big game for the 19 team.
Unsurprisingly, Small throwing shade at Truex received a considerable response from fans. One fan in particular, and Truex's longtime buddy, Dale Earnhardt Jr., responded on social media and let fans know what the former Joe Gibbs Racing driver thought about it. MTJ just shot a 183 score buck yesterday, Earnhardt wrote on Reddit. Ain't nothing gonna dampen that dude's mood this week. As most fans suspected, Truex left Phoenix and hasn't thought about racing since. Good for him. That means he's missed out on all the announcements, including the latest shocker this morning that Denny Hamlin's crew chief, Chris Gabehart, is being promoted to become JGR's competition director and being replaced by Ty Gibbs crew chief, Chris Gayle. If I'm being honest, I have to say this news really stunned me because it came out of nowhere. But guess what? I wasn't the only one surprised by it. Listen to what Denny Hamlin had to say about it this morning.
Are you hurt by this decision? Like, are you mad? Or are you because it seemed like you guys had such a good thing going.
I mean, I certainly was shocked by it. That's all.
It's hard to argue that Hamlin and Gabehart were the best driver-crew chief duo in the garage. Hamlin always talks so fondly of Gabehart and their relationship of the crew chief as the coach and him operating as the quarterback. Now, after 6 seasons dating back to 2019 and a total of 23 wins together, it's over. But honestly, I don't know if it's over at JGR. Clearly, there's something going on over there with these moves, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens next. And our last story of the day comes from an interview yesterday with NASCAR President Steve Phelps on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. Phelps talked about the 2024 season, the playoff format, and the potential of new OEMs joining in the future. It was during that discussion on the new manufacturers that I thought Phelps made some interesting comments about why the current OEMs would welcome new competition.
Well, I think it's a couple things. They would say kind of more media-centric, Dave, would be, hey, we compete in the showroom every day, and so I'd welcome someone else to compete with on the racetrack. I think it goes past that. I think it goes to some financial opportunities, because essentially when an OE comes to the sport, of the existing OEs you have, they're kind of looking at 3 things, right? They're looking at money potentially that goes to the race teams. They're looking at data that they provide to the race teams, and they're looking at engines. And so depending on where you are in the food chain of of our race teams, some get all 3, some get 2 of the 3, some get 1 of the 3. And maybe 1 doesn't get any. And those are difficult things. So bringing in new OEs allows for kind of spreading of the wealth, if you will. I think personally, and I think the NASCAR perspective would be having more A teams and B teams and having no C teams as part of it, if you're going to rank them in those 3 areas, I think are better for the sport because it provides more competition. And you consider with 18 different race winners and 10 different teams that won, 18 different cars with 10 different teams, that's pretty competitive. for any race series when half of the cars have won a race. So with that said, do I think that number could potentially improve with 2 new OEs? It potentially could.
I thought it was really interesting to hear him describe it as the food chain and how NASCAR would prefer to have all A and B teams in the future. But that wasn't all Phelps had to say. He also provided an update on Fontana.
Can you give us a Fontana update of any kind? There's obviously a lot going on out there. They're putting up a lot of buildings, but we're not seeing a racetrack yet.
Yeah, nothing to report on Fontana at this point. What I will say, Dave, and I've said it before, we are the Southern California market is very important for us. I would say that, continuing, not to get too technical on the business side, but the cost of capital is expensive right now. Interest rates are still high. So, we have to be very judicious about how we're going to spend our capital. And, we've got 15 racetracks that need, maintenance capital or structural changes to the tracks themselves that we need to spend. So we have to figure out where does Fontana stack as part of that? And then, obviously if we're going to have to, layer on more debt to the organization, what is the best time to do that? Would I like to have a racetrack in Southern California? Yes. Is it important for us to race in Southern California? It is. And so I think moving forward, we're exploring all opportunities in the Southern California market as we look to the 26 and 27 seasons. So hope to have something, in maybe the second quarter of next year that we can have some further updates as to what's happening in that Southern California market.
So we won't know anything until the second quarter of next year about the Southern California market. But just based on what he said, it doesn't sound like Fontana is on the top of the priority list. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. I want to hear what you thought about it. Let's start with Riley Herbst. Do you agree with Todd Gordon that the 25-year-old isn't ready for Cup? And what about Randall Burnett's remarks? For you Rowdy fans, do you think the hiring of Richard Boswell from SHR will help RCR on short tracks in 2025? And what do you guys think about shortening up of COTA? Like it or not? As for you Martin Truex Jr. fans, what did you think about James Small throwing shade at his former driver? And for you Denny Hamlin fans, what did you think about Chris Gabehart becoming JGR's competition director? How do you think this affects Hamlin's performance in 2025? And lastly, let me hear what you have to say about Steve Phelps' comments on Fontana. Do you think there's any chance it's back on the schedule in the future? And one last order of business, please continue to submit your Christmas gift guide ideas. I'll take them for another week and then put out the guide in a couple of weeks. Again, thanks as always for checking out the latest video and supporting the channel. I really, really appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.